Welcome to Inspiring Teachers, a show bringing you classroom tips, motivation, and stories from successful educators. Join Tavis Beam and Danny Hogger as they explore the why of teaching.
Welcome back to Inspiring Teachers. It's great to be here at St. Mary's College for the 2019 Action Research Conference. About 15 years in the making here of some of the finest educators bringing their research and their abstracts and their conclusions and advancing the future of what education will be. And Dr. HeidiMarie Rambo is here. It took a little bit of coaxing to get you in, but not too much because, as you mentioned, you're mentoring students, you are working behind the scenes, you are putting on events, you're doing so much here at St. Mary's, and thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Could you tell us a little bit about your journey in education? Where did it start? Who inspired that? And I hit the little inspiring word in there. We get extra bonus points for that. Yeah, it's really just beautiful branding and marketing. What is your story as far as how you came to education?
Well, that actually is a pretty layered story. So, my mother was a math teacher, and I swore I was not going to be a teacher. I mean, she was. I'm from a small town. Everybody knew my mother. My mother is infamous. She was, in fact, honored as the, honored alum of the school district, and the auditorium was packed. The guy who introduced her really was so happy because he had her as a student, right? So for me, that legacy was just something I wanted to get away from. So all through high school, I had this image that I was going to be an international economist. I was going to travel the world, and I went overseas, and I spent about a year in Finland, and that experience was transformative in a lot of ways. But one of the things that happened was while I was over in Finland, people kept coming to me and wanting me to be an English teacher. Right? Could you teach me English? Could we sit down and have a little group? And so suddenly I had this pop-up class while I was in Finland. I'm 17 years old. I have this pop-up English class. And so when I came back to go to college and eventually go to grad school, I found myself gravitating back towards teaching English, ESL specifically, to students. And so I spent a long time in Ohio. I was from Ohio, teaching students, English learners, we call them here in California, but international students who had graduated from high school in Ohio, had their diplomas, but didn't have the necessary academic language, reading and writing skills to succeed in college. So I did a lot of academic language recoup. And I was teaching in bridge programs, and so I eventually did my dissertation or my PhD program in applied linguistics. And after teaching in those bridge programs for about 15 plus years, I came to California and I started teaching in pre-service programs, teacher ed programs. I did that for about 10 years, and somehow, sort of serendipitously, made my way to the Master of Teaching Leadership, and I found that to be a really rewarding program because I'm working with experienced teachers, for the most part, experienced teachers who really want to get into their practice and are ready to look at subgroups within their classroom and think specifically about how am I going to make this learning more accessible to these groups of learners. And so it really spoke to my passion around, expanding the capacity of English learners to be successful here. And
that's such a valuable thing for California. We have English learners.
You have lots
of English learners.
That's
I work in a lot of schools, and it's really valuable for a teacher to walk into that situation knowing what they're going to do. They don't want to be shouldn't be figuring it out on the job. Right. Yeah, so giving them that training.
Right.
You really gave us a lot to unpack in a lot of your story. Can I ask why Finland? I know that they are a place we were talking about teaching with an outstanding education system, but that's not what drew you there, is it?
So, no, it wasn't what drew me there. And I was there 30 some years ago. So before they really came on the scene as a sort of an example education system, I went as an exchange student, a year-long exchange student, and it was, again, what I experienced, the immersion experience that I experienced, taught me that immersion isn't always the best solution for students. It just isn't always the best solution. For me, it was, it was difficult. It was traumatic in many ways, right? So I'm sitting in a classroom, and most of the conversation of what's going on is I don't want to say over my head. It wasn't over my head, but it was around me. Yeah. And over me, and never with me, or I was never part of that conversation. And so often I was just sitting in the classroom, trying to make sense of what was going on by finding little context clues that were going on in the classroom. And that has lasted, that has stuck with me and served me well in my teaching of teachers, because I can talk about, here's how that felt.
Yeah.
Right?
It should be part of teacher training that you have
Right.
a class that's taught in a language
Right.
that they don't know, or they are supposed make it something really obscure like Klingon or
That's
something.
Right.
Just so they can feel that feeling of what it's like, because I know that in my experience I've come across teachers who do feel like, oh, well, they're full immersion and they're going to pick it up, and really, especially with me, my background is mostly with middle school. If you aren't engaging them, they're gonna just check out. Right. And the amount of intentionality and engagement that you have to have in order to be even successful, let alone thrive in an environment like that.
That's right. And you need both the content knowledge, you need to have the stuff to talk about, so the content, but you also need the language and not just vocabulary, but you need so much more than vocabulary in order to explain your thinking and to talk about and contribute ideas. So it's a huge task.
Yeah, it really is, because I have not many, but a couple of language learners, and when we talk about something like American ideals and all the synonyms you would use to discuss freedom and opportunity, we don't teach the vocabulary that expands upon the basic needs of somebody operating in their day-to-day. So that's definitely true. Those context clues become important. The connection you have with your students, checking in with them with your eyes, right? Do they look like they're following along? Are they with you? When you give something to write, are they writing? Are they helping out? And I have just always encouraged them, ask me as many questions as you want. You're never going to be a nuisance. I'm here to help you and make sure that I'm keeping you with us and that you feel connected. So those things are very important. What would you say, now that you're working with students who are presenting master's research and carrying out action research, and I'm in the middle of mine, what do you think your why is for filling that role, mentoring students?
So, one of the most important things that I've learned kind of in 30-some years of teaching is that it is critical for a teacher to be self-reflective. Teacher has to be checking in with their own blind spots, with their assumptions, with their biases, and how they're teaching that literature, how they're teaching that content too. There are so many ways in which we approach our content and deliver it that communicates those biases. So, for this program, for this master's degree program, we embed reflection. We I don't want to say require, but we incorporate so many activities that expect our teachers to really be thinking about what was going on there, who's could be marginalized by this content or this approach to this content. By looking at data, by looking, in that data, including the outcomes data, but also the data from just how are students behaving in class and what is their affect. As you said, are they writing? Are they participating? Are they engaged? So what is this saying about their their feeling of self and how they're interacting with you as an individual, and how are you promoting or contributing to those positive, sense of self on the part of your students.
Is this a new idea in education? 20 years ago, were teachers asked to be reflective? I don't know. I'm genuinely wondering.
I think it's really, moved to the forefront of education. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say that it's a new idea.
Right.
Nothing is really new. And certainly, the inspiration for these ideas, was, Freire and critical pedagogy and the idea of a humanizing education. These philosophers were, on the scene 50 years ago.
Right.
But I think that more and more educators are starting to hear that in their programs, in their teacher ed programs. They're hearing it in their graduate programs. They're hearing it in the professional development that they might be participating in their schools, and so that they're understanding the importance.
I've definitely heard I've been teaching for 25 years, I don't need to reflect.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard that so much from newer teachers,
right.
But I haven't been teaching for 25 years. So.
It's really been a theme of our show is that not only professional development and not only in their training, in their programs, and their credentialing, but how many teachers that we've had have inspired us for so many different reasons because they're constantly reflecting. They join us, we reflect on what they said,
right.
We reflect on what we said to answer what they said,
right.
And we're left with this collective sharing and this community. So our last question, and we're so grateful that you would take time to join us today, is that we are sitting at the 2019 Action Research Conference at St. Mary's College. We've heard exceptional stories from Karen Vigna, from Joe Heffernan about their developments in education. We'll have even more in the third hour coming up. But what does this mean to you to be sitting here 15 years into this event and the sharing that happens, the networking that happened earlier this morning at the Soda Center? What does this day mean to you?
One of I've been popping into different sessions, and one of the students said to me, "This is so cathartic." The moment that I bring together this journey and have an opportunity to share it and pass it, move it forward, brings meaning to it. So I think that for me, this Action Research Conference and the work that it takes to put it together and keep all the moving pieces moving forward, it all becomes worth it to see teachers sort of move into their sense of themselves as change agents, right? They've suddenly they're out of that weeds of saying, oh, I'm writing these chapters, I've been working, I'm trying to get this. Now suddenly they're seeing themselves as a person who has agency, who can advocate for students.
In anthropological terms, it reminds me of a liminal event,
right.
Where when we cross this threshold, you are no longer a child, you are now an adult.
That's right.
With this celebration, you are now married.
Yep.
So this is more than just action research. The deeper meaning comes that it is that transition from one phase of their education to the next.
Craftily said,
Exactly.
Mr. Woodshop teacher. Craftily said.
Yes.
You carved that one out nicely. Dr. HeidiMarie, we're so glad that you would join us, and thank you for being a part of not just this day, but inviting us here to archive the amazing work that's being done, and for affecting all of your students' research, because you are having a hand in all of these agents of change, and we're grateful for everything that you're doing for education.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll be back in just a moment with Hour 3 of Inspiring Teachers right here live from St. Mary's College, the 2019 Action Research Conference. We'll be back in a moment.